1 hour left. That's how long I have left before I die. If I'd known the stakes were this high, I would never have played. But now, it's too late. I'm almost out of time. Now that I think about it, if I'd played fair with all of my opponents, maybe I wouldn't have gotten into this mess. But it's too late now. I'm a dead man walking. Even now, I can feel him approaching. He's so close now. I'm sorry, I got off track. It's not every day you find out when you'll die. But I have to ask you, if you did now, knowing when you'll die, what would you do? Would you try to prevent it? Or would you simply enjoy what days you have left? You never really know how far someone will go to stay alive until they're thrown into this sort of situation. The things you do will both terrify you and the people around you. I know, because for the past month, I've been living on nothing but borrowed time. Time I took from the people around me. It was the wrong thing, I know that now. But when you're in this situation, I'll tell you right now, you'll do the same thing. That I can promise you. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself again. I should start at the beginning and explain why I'm telling you this. Well, like I said, I'm on a timer, and I need to at least tell someone my story. Otherwise, there's absolutely no point in this. I need someone, no, anyone, to know my story, in case they're ever in my situation. You can learn from my mistakes. You see, I'm a gamer. No, I don't play video games. Instead, I'm what you call a simple gamer. I seek out any competitive game and play until I win. Like poker, blackjack, or even charades. I don't care what it is. If there's a prize, or just the satisfaction of being better than someone, then I'll play. So a month ago, while I was at the local bar, me and some of my mates were simply hanging out and looking to pick up some chicks. A usual Friday night for me and the guys. But before we could get busy, I was approached by a woman with short raven hair, and she wore a business suit with a skirt. She was attractive, especially with the glasses. She looked at me and smiled, and she raised a finger and gestured me to follow her. So naturally, I obeyed. She led me to a corner of the bar and immediately reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope. She handed it to me, but before I opened it, she stopped me and looked deep into my eyes. That was the part I started to become afraid, because her eyes had no irises. Her eyes were nothing but pitch black. When she spoke, her tone was a mixture between being threatening and calming. All she said was this: "Do not open this in public. Inside this envelope is a location to a place that you'll find challenging. My employer understands you're fond of games and wants to play the biggest game of your life. If you win, you'll receive anything you desire. But if you lose, you'll lose everything and everyone you know. The choice is yours if you want to play, of course." And within an instant, she was gone. She vanished completely from my senses. I looked down at the envelope. Her employer wanted me to play a game. I love to play games, and she said if I won, I'd receive whatever I desire. To be honest, I'd love to have her forever, or maybe all of this guy's money. But then again, why should I listen to her, I told myself. She's just some chick I met. How do I know she doesn't want to mug me or even kill me? Oh, who am I kidding? I've got nothing to steal, and as far as I'm aware, no one wants me dead. So what should I do? That's what I asked myself as I looked back to my friends, seeing the smiles on their faces. I'd give anything to see those smiles again, instead of the rage I see in my nightmares. I was an idiot that night. I wasn't thinking at all. If I knew what the game really was, I'd never have listened to that stupid bitch. But I wanted a challenge. So I left the bar without telling my friends goodbye. I walked down the street and into an alley. I slowly opened the envelope and revealed an address. I won't bother telling you what the address was, since that bitch and her employer left a long time ago. Anyway, I went there. It was a large hotel with security lined up all across the building, in every window and every street. Whoever this girl's employer is, he must have some serious money, I thought, as I walked inside the building. When I entered the premises, the woman was there. She was standing in front of an elevator and gestured for me to follow. I entered with her and slowly began the ascent to the top of the building. I turned to her and asked, "So what exactly am I going to be playing?" This was the point of no return, because when she looked at me, she smiled like she was about to commit a murder. "Well, if I told you your options, it would ruin the fun," she said as the door opened. She stepped into the dark hallway. It was barely lit, with only a few lights on. It was enough to see where you were going, though. I slowly stepped out of the elevator and followed her down the hallway to the door at the end. I was careful where I stepped, but as I was walking, I could have sworn I felt something brush against my leg at least 3 times. Maybe more, I can't quite remember. When I finally reached the door, the woman opened it and asked me to enter. If I knew what came next, I would have run away as fast as I could. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure that if I did that, he would have killed me. As I walked inside the dark room, the door slammed behind me. I quickly turned to the door and realized it was locked. But before I had a chance to question what was going on, a calm but haunting voice spoke. "I've been waiting for you to arrive. Please take a seat." In a matter of moments, a lightning bolt struck, and at the same time, all the lights in the room turned on. I looked behind me and saw a desk with a man sitting behind it. He was dressed in a dark business suit. His hair was short but black, and like the woman, his eyes were pitch black. He was an old-looking man. I originally thought he was about 50 or 60 years old because of his appearance. But the most haunting thing I thought about him were the dark veins on his neck that appeared every few seconds. The man gestured to the chair in front of the desk and smiled. I slowly walked over to him and sat down at the chair. "Before we begin, I should let you know that I'm an expert at games. It's my favourite pastime. The overall thrill of having little chance of succeeding is so amusing." His voice was cold as ice, with a hint of murderous intent. I gripped the chair with my hands and tried to relax. I breathed out and looked at him calmly. "So, what are we going to play?" "I should let you know that I've never lost at anything," I said proudly, which made him raise his eyebrows. "I'm aware of what you're capable of," he said calmly. He began to reach into the drawer and pulled out a deck of black cards with strange-looking markings on the back of them. "I've been watching you for a long time, and I have to admit, you're very good," he said with a smile, as he started to shuffle the deck. I sat up straight and looked at the cards. "How long have you been watching me?" He looked at me and grinned. "Since you started playing." My eyes widened at him, and I started to laugh. "Sure you have, mister. If you've known about me that long, then you should know that I'm an expert at cards. And more importantly, why would you only talk to me now?" He looked at me and slammed the cards into the desk and spread them out in a straight line. "I am aware that you're an expert at cards, but we won't be playing cards." This caught my interest as he slowly picked up one card and showed it to me. It had a picture of a chessboard and what appeared to be chess pieces with skulls on them. He quickly put the card back in the deck and looked into my eyes. "Here's how this will work. You'll draw a card, and whatever card it is will be the game you play. Some will be simple. Some will have dangerous rules. But there are also some games you have never heard of. Pray you don't get one of those," he said in a serious tone. I looked at the cards. "Why not?" I asked him quietly. He looked at me with a look of annoyance. "Because if you do, you'll never be the same again." He began to slowly shuffle the deck again, and all of a sudden, he quickly slammed the cards on the desk and laid them out in a straight line. He sat there and waited for me to pick. I looked over every card, and they were all the same. There was no way for me to tell which one has what. I didn't even know what most of these games were going to be. "Which one?" I asked myself, as I raised my hand and slowly hovered over it. I began to pray it was an easy one, with the words he said starting to echo in my mind. I don't know why I was so worried. I mean, I'd beaten everyone, and this old fool should be easy. But I think it was the fact I didn't know what the game was that was most terrifying. I slowly lowered my hand to a card in the middle and picked it up. My eyes were clamped shut as I raised it to my face. Soon, I opened my eyes, and what I saw, I didn't understand. There was a picture of a man standing in the center of the card, but he was surrounded by ghosts who looked like they were screaming at him. I looked at the man, and he was curious to see what I got. I handed the card to him, and he looked. He smiled wide and said in a vicious tone, "Well, consider your life over, my friend. Now, you're on a timer." I was confused, and he knew it. He lowered the card for me to look at. "This is Death's game. The object of the game is to outlast your opponent." I still didn't understand what the game was, but I noticed that on my wrist, a set of numbers started to appear. It looked like a timer. It started to count down. I was shocked by the initial appearance of it, but now it was continuing to tick down. I turned to the man in shock, but noticed on his wrist was a timer as well, with the same amount of time. Both of our timers were counting down at the same speed. "Here's how the game works. We each get 2 days to begin with, but the timer will slowly go down and indicate how long we have left. But the objective of this game is to outlast the other. So in order to gain time, you need to sin." I shook my head in confusion as to what he meant, but he raised a finger and pointed at me. "In order to gain more time, all you need to do is perform an act of sin. For example, if I robbed someone, I'd gain about 30 minutes. But if I was to kill someone, I'd gain an hour or more. It ultimately depends on how bad the act is." I sat there in shock and shook my head. No, I don't want to do this. I don't want to play this game. How do I stop it?" I screamed at him, but he just laughed in amusement. "Oh, you can't stop. Once the game begins, it can only stop when the other person's dead. I looked at him with wide eyes. I looked to the timer again and started clawing at it with my finger. But all I did was create some small cuts. I winced in pain and looked at the man with anger in my eyes. He stood up and spoke. "Look, you were the one who wanted to play, not me. Besides, even if you didn't show up, I would have had my assistant go and find someone else for me to play with." I was shaking uncontrollably as I watched him walk over to me and pat my shoulder softly. He started to walk out of the room. "You did this to yourself, you know." I sat there and heard the door open, but I turned and screamed at the top of my lungs. "Wait, who are you?" He turned and looked at me. He smiled wide and spoke one final time before vanishing into thin air. "Oh, you know who I am. After all, we're playing my game." And in an instant, he was gone. The timer continued to tick down. I was playing a game, and all I had to do to win is outlast him. Once it was over, I could move on with my life. I walked down the hallway and went down the elevator. Once I was on the ground floor, I noticed all the security was gone. They must have left with him. I slowly made my way out of the hotel and onto the streets. All I had to do was sin, and I could gain more time. But the less serious the deed, the less time I'd receive. So for the first day, I simply stole some things from a grocery store and went home after that. But all I got was 1 hour. It wasn't enough time. At that point, I only had a day and 3 hours, so I amped up my deeds. I stole from some homeless people, which got me a few hours. But then, at that point, I realized I had to do more than just steal. All of a sudden, I had an idea. I called a local masseuse who made home visits. She arrived soon after and began setting up. I said I was thirsty and went to grab a drink. I walked over to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. As she was bent down setting up the table, I grabbed her from behind and slit her throat. She dropped dead in an instant without a scream or sound. I stood there with the knife in my hand, and within a few seconds, I'd realized what I'd done. I'd just murdered a woman without any reason, only to keep myself alive. But you see, that's where this gets interesting. Because I checked my timer, and I had a full 24 hours added to my wrist. A full day, and all I had to do was kill this woman. It was so easy. So I knew what I had to do now. I went into the bathroom and cleaned off all the blood on my hands and face. Once that was done, I left and went looking for my next victim. After a few days of killing, my work started to appear in the paper and on the news. I was becoming famous. You probably would have heard of me if you live in England. But during one fateful night stroll, I took more victims. I had a whole week on my timer. I was feeling pretty good until I saw a group of people recognize me. It was my friends. They were looking at me with horrified faces as they realized I was covered in blood. In that moment, I knew they were going to call the police. In fact, one of them already had their phone out. But I stopped them. The only way I could. I had 2 weeks of time now because of that. I spent those 2 weeks in my apartment, wallowing in my mistakes. I'd killed my friends, innocent people, people I'd known since I was a child. At the time, I was blaming that monster of a man for doing this to me. But if I never met that bitch, My friends and all those other girls I'd killed would still be alive. But it wasn't his fault. It was mine. I did this to myself. I did this to myself. I did this to myself. I didn't bother killing anyone else after that day. I'd betrayed the people I trusted. I couldn't be forgiven for the things that I've done. I'm a monster. This game needs to stop. I have to put an end to it. I called the police a few minutes ago, and they'll be here any second. So, as I sit here waiting for the pigs to show up, I'm going to give you some advice. If you're ever approached by someone who promises you anything if you win a game against their employer, make sure you check their eyes. Well, that's all I really have to say right now. Oh, excuse me for a second. There's someone at the door. Case number 214177858. Date 1st of October 2014. Reporting officer Deputy Williams. Prepared by Corporal Stevens. Incident type murder. Address of occurrence 47 Kentish Town Road, London, NW1 8NX, United Kingdom. Evidence: fingerprints taken from door and laptop. Footprint: size 10 Nike Air, found in drying paint. Computer: found on desk with open audio software. On October 1st, 2014, at approximately 21:32, the owner of apartment 23 dialed 999 and said to the officers stationed at the time that he was the murderer of more than 30 victims in the past month. He also stated that he was willingly surrendering to the police and that this wasn't a hoax. Deputy Williams arrived on the scene at around 21:40, responding to the 999 call. He and several other officers discovered the owner of the apartment dead in the centre of his apartment. The officers at the scene immediately called in for an investigation unit and searched the apartment for anything suspicious. The investigation team arrived at 21:50. The cause of death was originally believed to be a sudden heart attack. However, upon further investigation, it was discovered to not be the only cause of death. The man's bones were completely crushed, and all of his muscles were completely torn apart. At this current time, there's no physical evidence on what or who caused these injuries. Strangely, the body of the deceased was discovered with both of his eyes pitch black, and the veins on his body to have turned a dark shade of black. At this time, the investigation team has no answers for how this happened. There's no evidence to suggest a break-in or that another individual was at the scene. However, it's been noted the deceased man's laptop was found on with open audio software, with only a single sentence spoken. You did this to yourself, you know.